what seemed like at least a conference title, now apparently has to shift gears and regroup. How do they get out of this?
I think they get out of it by going back to what brought them success in the first place, which was bringing in guys who want to win and guys who are committed to building a winning culture. I think they got stars in their eyes with Kyrie Irving. I mean, Kyrie Irving won a championship in Cleveland, hit the biggest shot of the season, playing alongside maybe the best player of all time, and decided he wanted to leave because he wanted to be the man. So whatever you want to say about Kyrie Irving, winning is not the most important thing to him. It was, I believe, to Isaiah Thomas. I believe it's the most important thing to Grant Williams. I love the Grant Williams pick. He's not Al Horford. I don't know if he's ever going to be as good as Al Horford, but he is that type of player, that type of talent, and that type of character. And that was a step in the right direction. And by the way, I think getting Carson Edwards early in the second round is also good for them as another kind of quasi-under-recruited guy who can be an offensive spark plug off the bench. Romeo Langford, the big question for him in Indiana was his outside shooting. Played the whole season. Didn't tell anybody about this with a torn ligament in his thumb, which required surgery to fix, but he didn't want to have the surgery during the season because he wanted to play for Indiana. Indiana kid, huge icon inside the state, made that sacrifice, never complained once about it. I know he's not supposed to be the hardest worker, Sam, but that to me tells me that Romeo Langford wants to win, and he's going to give Boston that chance, but they got work to do.
Guys, I love what the Celtics did to be drafting where they are and to get a talent. Romeo Langford is top 5, top 7 talent. And then you look at Grant Williams, 2-time SEC Player of the Year, and he's gotten better every year. And then you look at the Boston Celtics. Weston, you know this. The worst thing to be is in the lottery consistently. Why? Because all those young guys, at some point, they look around the room and they look at the numbers and the money and they say, hey, it's only so much money to go around. And that's when the infighting, that's when that green-eyed monster take over. And that's what happened to the Celtics. And then when you go out and sign a Gordon Hayward, and I know what Danny Ainge was thinking. Kyrie Irving, Gordon Hayward, it can put us over the top. We can be a championship team. Yeah, but when it didn't happen, think about this. All those guys in that locker room went to 2 Eastern Conference Finals Game 7 without Kyrie Irving, without Gordon Hayward. So they're sitting there saying, maybe all we needed was another year, more time. So I think Danny Ainge has got to reboot that roster. He got to reset. He and the coach Brad Stevens got to reset that locker room because the Boston Celtics used to be all about team and winning, and they kind of got distracted from that. They still need to thin out that roster, Wes, a little bit more because you still got that money sitting out there, and you still got some young players that want to get paid. But I think they're on the right track with those 2 kids, the talent, and what Danny Ainge did late in the draft. They had a good night.
Yeah, even with Hayward on the roster, it sure looks like it's going to be Jason Tatum and Jaylen Brown's team in Boston moving forward and these young additions. To Detroit now, where the Pistons are all in on Blake Griffin, who unfortunately was nearly all out in their first-round playoff loss to Milwaukee. Nonetheless, not a bad first year for Dwayne Casey on the job. Sekou Doumbouya does not turn 19 until December. He was their pick at number 15, first international player to go in the draft. So what's the outlook in Motown for the summer, Sam?
Well, they don't have a lot. You got Blake Griffin. He's been battling injuries. You got Andre Drummond. But I like this pick in Sekou. And I'll let you say the last name.
Doumbouya.
There you go. Booyah. But I like the pick. Where did Dwayne Casey come from? Toronto. Who did they take? Pascal Siakam. And I think when they saw this young man, 18 years old, long, athletic, I think they saw Pascal Siakam like in him. And when you look at him, long, athletic, he can score inside. Look, Pascal had to add to his game, add the outside shooting, but this kid is active, he's long, he can defend, and at 18 years old, the upside there, and when you look at Pascal Siakam, where he's come from, and 2 years ago, I remember sitting there with Leo Routon, looking at Siakam, and I love this kid because you could just see him trending in the right direction. If this kid can be anything like Siakam's going to be, we think he's going to be all-star in Toronto, this kid has a chance, a good pick, a good start for the new regime in Detroit.
Problem is, based on the intel you read, he is years away from being Pascal Siakam. I don't know if they're going to be that patient playing around Blake Griffin. Like Detroit, Orlando returned to the postseason under a new coach last season. In fact, I don't feel like people really noticed this, but the Magic made a 17-game improvement under Steve Clifford before falling to the champion Raptors in the first round. On draft night, they surprised many by taking Auburn's Chuma Okeke, who tore his ACL in the tourney, won't be available right away. Big picture, though, Wes, how do they keep the momentum forward?
Well, it started with defense, and that's why they were good with Steve Clifford. And having Coach Pearl here last night to talk about Chuma Okeke, he's going to fit in perfectly. But it gets complicated for Orlando when you start managing the cap situation for them. They have 2 key free agents, Terrence Ross and Vucevic. If they don't re-sign both, they have $17 million in room, so they can't replace them.
Right.
There's a ton of money on the market. We got 10 teams with over $25 million in cap room who are going to be going after players like Vucevic and Terrence Ross. So it's going to put pressure on Orlando to re-sign these guys. If they don't re-sign them, it's going to be difficult to replace them. And, you know, Orlando also has a little bit of roster balance that they got to figure out with Bamba, Isaac, Okeke, Vucevic, Mozgov. So it's going to be an interesting summer. It's going to be a juggling act for Orlando. But, you know, with John Hammond and Jeff Weltman, they're in good hands to try to get this thing figured out.
You could argue Vucevic is integral to what they do. They play through him so much offensively. At the same time, you don't want him to impede the progress of those young bigs they have on the roster. The Pacers were also a big surprise for much of last season, but they suffered a major blow when Victor Oladipo went down midseason. Of course, there is some news on that front. Team president Kevin Pritchard told reporters Oladipo may not return to the floor for Indiana until December or even January. The timeline for Oladipo's recovery has been uncertain since he ruptured the quadriceps tendon in his right knee in late January. Indiana went 16-23 in the regular season and playoffs after he was hurt. Remember, the Pacers will be without Tyreke Evans. He was banned by the league for a violation of the substance abuse policy. On draft night, Indy also went big and international with 6'11" Goga Bitadze, the MVP of the Adriatic League, and he played for the same team that produced Nikola Jokic and Ivica Zubac. So, Sam, what should summer look like in Indy?
Well, it's going to be tough for them. I like the draft pick because they needed to add some size. But without Victor Oladipo, and you're uncertain about him, you're talking about an all-star caliber player, a two-way player that can get you 22, 23 points a game, that's a lockdown defender. So it's going to be tough. But when I look at their free agents, I like Bogdanovich. They got to try to bring him back. You're talking about a guy who can defend his position, who can play the 2 and 3, who can knock down threes. So to me, he's the key. And then you're looking at Thaddeus Young. Will they have enough money to bring back a guy like him? Again, that hybrid 4, who, again, he's not a great three-point shooter. He's a great guy in the locker room. He can knock down the 3, but he's one of those guys that a coach loves because you don't have to manage him. All you have to do is just coach Thad, put him out there, tell him what to do, and he is a pro's pro. So it's going to be up in the air for Indiana. Nate McMillan has done an unbelievable job, he and Kevin Pritchard. But without your best player in the fold, and you don't know when he's going to be back and how healthy he's going to be, everything is in flux right now.
Generally true in the NBA. Teams suffer without their best players on the floor. Not as good. You can take that to the bank. Still ahead. They're still celebrating in Toronto, at least until Kawhi Leonard makes his decision. We'll get into the champ summer next.